While President Biden was busy making major policy moves, Donald Trump was in damage control mode today. He held a rally outside Milwaukee, which is hosting the RNC, and which Trump reportedly called horrible last week. Well, at today's rally, he tried to deny making those comments.
I love Milwaukee. I was the one that picked Milwaukee, I have to tell you. I was the one that picked it. These lying people that they say, oh, he doesn't like Milwaukee. I love Milwaukee.
He loves Milwaukee so much that he was going to commute 90 minutes from Chicago throughout the convention next month. That's according to the New York Times. But after reporters started to press them about these plans, the campaign reversed course and said Trump will now stay in Milwaukee. But is it too late? Because remember, Milwaukee is the largest city in a critical swing state that Donald Trump needs in order to win the election. We got to bring in Charlie Sykes, a veteran Wisconsin radio host, MSNBC contributor and columnist, and author of the book, How the Right Lost Its Mind. And Cornell Belcher is here. We have not seen him in ages. Glad to have him back. Democratic strategist, pollster, and founder of Brilliant Corners Research. He is also an MSNBC contributor. Charlie, how bad a look is this for the Trump campaign? Do the people of Wisconsin, of Milwaukee, know what he's done, insulted their own town?
Yes, they do. I mean, we always speculate about what breaks through. Trust me, everybody in Wisconsin knows what Donald Trump said. And you can't unring a bell. You can't say, oh, I didn't say it. When you have all of these other Republican congressmen who are coming up with different explanations for why he was saying that Milwaukee was horrible. And then, of course, you get the story about Chicago. What you need to understand about Milwaukee is Milwaukee's always had a quasi, inferiority complex, a little bit of a chip on its shoulder, being in the shadow of Chicago. So these things tend to, tend to sting a little bit, but they also, will be remembered. So he's not able to scrape this one off the shoe, and there's nothing he's going to say that's going to change that.
It was good enough for Laverne and Shirley, Charlie. It is damn good enough for me. Cornell, here's what I really need help with. Donald Trump is insulting voters in a key swing state that he needs. He's refusing to court Nikki Haley voters who are very loyal to her. Explain to me how these could be the actions of a person who would like to win this upcoming election.
Well, despite all that, it is what we've all seen of Trump and his supporters, right? They don't move. They're not going anywhere, right? He's not going to lose any support in Wisconsin because he insults Milwaukee, because his support isn't sort of based on that sort of thing. So he's got a base there locked in. The question really, Stephanie, is, can Biden really pull back together that winning coalition that looked a lot like the Obama coalition from 2012, but that coalition that eroded away in 2016, much of it eroding away, not towards Donald Trump, but eroding away from Hillary Clinton in third-party voting.
Charlie, we need to look at a video because I was talking about it in the previous segment. Donald Trump and Republicans 24/7 are just attacking President Biden, whether he's fit for office, and they're sharing misleading videos of the president because they're trying to attack his fitness. But put your misleading videos over here and let's just watch a clip of what Donald Trump had to say today at his own rally. Watch.
Joe Biden's granting mass thing. He's going to formally grant a mass amnesty. Joe Biden, this guy is just the worst. Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of our country, will be a fading nightmare. He'll be I have fading memory, but I think, do you mind if I change it?
A fading, incoherent nightmare. One could say that's what they just watched. If you're the Biden campaign, what do you do with this?
Well, you do what the Trump campaign is doing. You try to weaponize it in a certain way, and that should be relatively easy, right? Because you have these episodes of gibberish every single time he speaks. And of course, that's going to be on display during the debate if it actually takes place next week. But I think it was Tom Nichols in The Atlantic who made the point that that one of Trump's great tricks that he pulled off was to convince many people in the media that this kind of incoherent gibberish is just sort of, well, it's just Donald Trump. You can kind of brush it off. There's an asymmetry where Joe Biden is held to a standard that if he misses words, if he stutters, that somehow this is more evidence that that he's losing it. And then Donald Trump goes off, and over what are he's talking about, sharks or batteries or the kind of incoherent ravings that you just mentioned in Wisconsin, and it's sort of like, well, Trump, same old, and that's a problem that they're going to have to confront.
Raul, what does President Biden's move to protect undocumented spouses mean in reality?
This is potentially a true game changer for so many people in the immigrant community. It's a very common misconception right now. People have the idea that if you have come to this country without authorization and you marry a citizen, U.S. citizen, that automatically confers citizenship. But it does not. The only way a person can adjust their status in that type of situation is to leave the U.S., return to their country of origin, and then wait potentially 3 years, 10 years, or maybe forever, because that triggers a ban on their returning to the country. So we have this sort of catch-22 system in our immigration policy right now. And what Biden is doing is fixing that. So now families will not have to split apart with no guarantee of being able to reunite just to get a green card that the undocumented spouse is already eligible for. So this is a big deal. And it also, coming on the anniversary of DACA, and we're in Immigrant Heritage Month, I think this potentially could energize many Latino voters and many on the progressive side of the party.
Raul, our immigration system has been broken for years with Congress doing nothing. But President Biden is now insisting that America can both secure the border and create a pathway to citizenship for immigrants. What do you think about that messaging?
I think the messaging is outstanding because, number one, look at the contrast with Donald Trump. He has already promised mass deportations, detention camps, and has even said he would not rule out family separations. So what Joe Biden is doing, it's sound policy, but it's very good politics. And just to be clear, President Biden is not giving anyone anything. What he is doing for the undocumented spouses of citizens, he is clearing an obstacle that will allow them to access green cards that they are already eligible for. So there is no reward for illegal behavior. This is a benefit that people are already entitled to. They just cannot access it without this extreme hardship and uncertainty.
Peter, one immigration advocate called this the biggest policy announcement since Obama announced DACA. How big of a deal do you see this as?
Well, I think it is a big policy announcement, absolutely. And it is comparable to DACA in a lot of ways. Obviously, like DACA, it's an executive action. That means that there's going to be a challenge to it legally, of course. It also means that it doesn't have the same enduring force that a law passed by Congress has. Therefore, in fact, it's a less than ideal solution for those who are looking to accomplish the aim. But it's a way for Biden to say, look, I'm doing what I can while Congress is dithering and not taking action. And it's also taking place at the exact same time that DACA took place. Remember, President Obama did this in June of an election year. President Biden's doing it in June of an election year. That's not a coincidence. They're trying, of course, as Raul was saying, to appeal to the progressive part of the party and to Latino voters and to remind them that there's a difference between having President Biden in the Oval Office and having former President Trump in the Oval Office. It comes after, of course, President Biden took some rather stringent action in terms of limiting asylum rights for those coming across the border, which upset a lot of people in the progressive wing of his party. So he's trying to say to them, yeah, you may be upset at me for that in terms of trying to secure the border, but here's part of the solution on the other side of the equation. And that's a mix, by the way. You mentioned the securing the border at the same time trying to provide relief for those who are here in the country illegally. That's the same formula that both Barack Obama and George W. Bush promoted for years, but never got Congress to adopt.
Ali, immigration and border security are a huge issue for Republicans, but also some Democrats and those who don't have strong political affiliations, but they do vote. What are people on the Hill saying about this move from the president?
Look, I think Raul was right at the beginning of this to bring up the fact that this was a move that was really geared towards shoring up progressives. I think that certainly that was noticed today as I was reading through and listening through the reaction from congressional leaders who were both at the White House or voicing their opinion in statements and tweets. But I also think that Peter's right to couple today's announcement with the announcement that came several weeks prior to it, which was on asylum and trying to stem the tide of illegal crossings at the southern border. That was something that drew the ire of progressives. And we also heard some notions of that even as they were praising this latest action today. On the Republican side of this, you can almost guarantee that Republicans are going to balk at any move that the White House makes on immigration, either calling it too little too late or saying that it's too much. Certainly that was the reaction that we saw today. But I do think it's really important as we continue to talk about the role that Congress plays in continuing to not solve this problem. There was an attempt earlier this year, and we cannot remind of this enough, that was bipartisan in nature, that was putting on the table things that Republicans did not think that Democrats would entertain. And ultimately, Democrats more than entertained them. They left them as part of the deal. And then ultimately that was scuttled and fell apart because Trump signaled to Republican allies on the Hill that he preferred to keep this as a live ball during an election year. We saw that vote fail earlier in the year as soon as the deal was cobbled together. And then several weeks ago, just before we saw these executive actions from the president, we saw Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer once again put them on the floor. A last-ditch effort, maybe, but definitely a political messaging vote to show where Republicans were on solving an issue that is so central to their election messaging point for November and for 2024. It's a favorite thing to talk about for former President Trump consistently, and Peter and I have been out there with him for years now since the 2016 campaign. Every time he finds himself in a spot of polling trouble, he pivots back towards immigration. You know that Trump wanted to leave it as a live ball for that reason, but watching the ways that Congress and the Biden administration have tried to work on this shows that they want to highlight it as a 2024 election issue that they are really trying to turn in their favor.
Then it should come as no surprise that Donald Trump reacted to President Biden's announcements and said this about migrants. Watch.
They give them welfare, they give them free health care, food stamps. Chain migration, one of the catastrophic things, one of the many catastrophic things that we're confronted with when they come in. Crooked Joe is sending a message to the world that he rewards illegal entry.
Raul, there are voters all across the country who hear this and they believe it. Are Democrats framing their response in the right way?
My sense is that Democrats are beginning to frame their response in the right way. And for starters, just, for fact's sake, as we say, not only is what President Trump, former President Trump saying there untrue, undocumented people do not qualify for these government benefits that he is mentioning. You could argue that people in the president's own family have benefited from this so-called chain migration. So I'll leave that there. But the thing is, for Democrats, especially coming into the debate, they are starting to draw a good distinction between themselves and the GOP. It's a question that Americans will increasingly have to want. Do we want to be a country that is in favor of family separations, or do we want to be a country that is at least trying to keep families intact and to preserve our border security? I think the president deserves a lot of credit, though, for recognizing that the immigration issue is not just about border security. It's about our undocumented population. It's about people here with no ways to adjust their status. So he is seeing the bigger picture on this, and he's with the public. Earlier this year, the Pew Center asked Americans what they wanted in terms of immigration solutions. 56% said they wanted more pathways to legal status for the undocumented. So I think the president and the Democratic Party is on the right track here.